What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm going to share how I got to be the #1 free-to-play player in Marvel Snap. The short story here is I played a bunch of Deadpool Destroy, and I've talked about this. The deck is really fun, and this season I decided I wanted to climb the post-infinite leaderboard, so that's what I did instead of playing a bunch of Conquest, which is typically what I do. And I would say the long story here is the fact that I've been playing this game since the closed beta, so I have a super inflated collection level, and I also use my resources very sparingly. You can check out some of my other videos to see what I mean about that, as far as advice for what to spend spotlight caches and tokens on. And I guess part of that too would be like breaking down how to play Deadpool Destroy. I think I'm gonna do that in an upcoming video, just like a what's what, explaining every single play that I make, which I'm kind of gonna do in this video as well. But for this video, I just wanted to showcase the actual games that got me on the global infinite leaderboard, that pushed me into the top 1,000. I was already in the top 1,000 for America, but now I'm going for global, baby. So you can see at the very beginning of this video, I was very, very close to the top 1,000. So we're just going to take a look at my final games to finish off that climb. This first game here that we are looking at, I snapped on turn 2 for Nico's draw 2 cards ability, and that's also why I didn't play X23 on that first turn. On turn 3, this allows me to play Forge into Deadpool plus Wolverine. Unfortunately, my opponent's Gladiator kills my Knull, which is a pretty big bummer. It does make my death a little bit cheaper, but it's awkward because with Nico drawing me 2 cards, I'm going to see every single card in my deck this game. So I would have seen Knull here had my opponent not destroyed it, had my opponent destroyed anything else with Gladiator in this spot. If they had destroyed Venom, that could have been like absolutely insane for me, or allowed me to pick up any other destroy card. That could have been really sweet. But on turn 4, I'm gonna use Killmonger to grab myself some extra energy. Now I can play Deadpool, Carnage, and Venom right here. So I can still set up for some pretty big stuff. I'm gonna go for the, and also I can battle for the big house here pretty nicely, so that's good too. I'm just gonna play Deadpool plus Venom into Pet Mansion, since that location already has more power there, 5 as opposed to 2, so Venom will be able to soak up that, and then maybe the X23 will flip over into Sokovia. Ronin is the turn 5 play for my opponent. Not something that you see super often, but we're gonna be able to dump out our entire hand here, so it's not really a huge deal. What is a little bit awkward is we do have priority going into this final turn, which means my opponent can flip Pet Mansion with Shang-Chi, and I'm thinking my opponent's last card could potentially be, I'm blanking on the name right now, Maximus, to give me, though actually Maximus won't work here. Yeah, I've already drawn my whole deck. I don't have any cards that my opponent, so it would have to be like Master Mold, I guess. But either way, I decided to put a little bit more power in Sokovia, and we'll be able to dump our hand. So we should be able to beat my opponent in the Ronin lane and in the big house, no matter what happens here. And my opponent is gonna basically use all of their resources on this final turn to beat me in Pet Mansion, not realizing that I'm going to be able to dump my entire hand, including a free death, to beat them in Sokovia. But it was kind of telegraphed because my opponent can see that I have 0 cards in deck right now, but Shadow King plus Scar is going to get my opponent a win in the Pet Mansion, but it'll allow us to walk away with 4 cubes. Now this second game is an interesting one because my opponent is also playing Destroy, but it is a Triskelion game. So both of us have a few extra cards that we can play around with, and then I'm actually opposite of last game. I'm going to lose out on some draws here because I was unable to make a play on turn 2. My opponent was able to play a Nova off that Triskelion, and then we get Warrior Falls as location number 3. My opponent follows that up with Hazmat, and one thing that is pretty interesting here, they, by the way, have to play Hazmat, otherwise they would have denied themselves another draw. But one thing that's really interesting is my opponent does not yet know that I am playing a Destroy deck. So that makes this one a little bit interesting as well. I forget what play I go for here. I think I just go for Deathlok on Warrior Falls. It's not a super strong play. It honestly might even be considered a bad play because of exactly how this plays out, but my opponent plays their Deathlok into their X23. Their Nova won't pump up their X23, it will only pump up their Deathlok and then also potential Knulls or something, but their X23 lands in Warrior Falls, which means I kill it again. So now my opponent has 7 energy this turn, which could be a little bit worrisome here. With 5 energy, I have the opportunity to play Carnage and then Hulkbuster onto Warrior Falls, and at this point, I'm kind of just battling for Warrior Falls, and if any of my opponent's cards wind up in that location, I'm just going to kick them right back out. And my opponent uses their 7 energy to play Agatha. Kind of crazy. Luckily, Agatha did not get played into Warrior Falls, but yeah, that was surprising. My opponent was able to do pretty well despite being under Agatha's control for the first half of that game there. They were able to finally get out of Agatha though, thanks to Deathlok killing their X23. And now for the final turn of the game, I'm gonna make like kind of a spicy play. My opponent is a destroy deck. They finally have control over their actions here. So I'm gonna play Knull into a technically losing position in Triskelion, and I have to imagine that if my opponent is able to battle for either Throne Room or Warrior Falls, I'm just gonna hope they aren't able to play for both, but that if they are able to play for one, they aren't going to be able to play for the other, and that is going to require some amount of destruction, whether it be Venom over in Throne Room or what have you. And it looks like that is the play. We're gonna get Wolverine plus Venom into Throne Room. Does mean my opponent is going to be able to take over that location, but that also gives me a massive Knull here, and now there's no way they are beating me in Triskelion, and we grab them for 2 cubes. So kind of a weird destroy mirror there, especially because of Triskelion and especially because of Agatha, but we were able to take it down regardless there in the end. So that will put me up to 1,028th place on the global leaderboards, and I do believe we're going to take a look at 2 pretty quick ones here now, which is not going to be for the most exciting video content, but this first game I get White Hot Room, and basically the location firstly isn't super important. It's more so the fact that I've got Forge plus Deadpool here, and I do believe we get a better location next turn. Most of the time when people see this turn 1 Forge, they kind of just expect you to be playing a Destroy deck now. I think Destroy is a pretty known quantity, but it was the fact that I picked up this X23 that made me decide to snap on turn 2, and with that my opponent retreats. So that's gonna move us a little bit higher up in the ratings. I think that'll put me up to, just 1,021, so we still have a little bit to go. And this game, we get Nor Dimension, and we already kind of have a lot of really great stuff. Basically, after seeing how the last game went for me with that early snap causing my opponent to retreat, I snap again, I'm feeling hot, and we get another retreat out of it. And now, I am at rank 1001. So with this game, all I need is 1 more cube. So I'm like kind of tempted. Do I just want to snap again, put the pressure on my opponent and get onto the global leaderboard? Or do I want to play it safe, see what happens? Turns out my opponent is snapping on turn 1 here. So we're in for it, in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna play Forge into Hotel Inferno. This will grow my Knull at the very least, so that's kind of cool. And we take out my opponent's Zabu, which typically in Zabu decks, Zabu is the best card, and then we see Warrior Falls as location number 2. So I'm feeling pretty good all of a sudden. Now it does look like it is probably a Loki deck by the looks of the Collector, and Collector is gonna get a little bit of a boost thanks to Great portal here. I'm going to throw Wolverine into Warrior Falls on turn 3. A little bit off curve, a little bit awkward, but it's still a forged up Wolverine. My opponent plays Agent Coulson to continue to buff up the Collector. And then I get to play X-23 and Hulkbuster, so I'm back on curve here on turn 4. Ultimately, though, I actually decide that I want to play Hulkbuster and then the X-23, because I do want this Hulkbuster on Wolverine. I just think that that's going to be simpler for me to work with, and this also importantly guarantees that I destroy the X-23 this turn in Warrior Falls, which is going to give me an extra energy for next turn, which will allow me to play both Venom and Killmonger, which will probably just lead to better and stronger plays throughout the rest of the game. So that's why I sequenced those cards in that precise order. X-23 lands back in Warrior Falls, so now I can use Venom to kill both of them, and then Killmonger to kill the X-23 yet again. That will leave me with 4 cards destroyed, so death will only cost 2, and I will have 8 energy next turn. So that is a pretty good position to be in. Plus, X-23 or Wolverine could potentially die again from Warrior Falls, so I'm snapping back. I don't need the extra cubes to get into the top 1K, but I figured let's roll with it here. My opponent drops a ton of cards into Warrior Falls themselves, including a Deadpool with Hulkbuster on it, and that is a free Deadpool, so my opponent will be able to play that on the cheap next turn. Plus, they've got a Carnage, which means that we are potentially looking to destroy their Carnage this turn, and then also a Venom into Agent Coulson there. My Venom is going to blow up that X-23 and that Wolverine, like I said. Wolverine is going to land over in Hotel Inferno, and so is the X-23 before the Killmonger sends it out of there and back into Warrior Falls. So we do get to kill that X-23 again. We are going to have 9 energy for this final turn, a pretty big one, and we've got a free death. We aren't, unfortunately, actually going to be able to do anything with that 9 energy. We needed 1 more for the ability to play Typhoid Mary on this turn as well, but we still get to make a pretty good showing of it. We'll be able to play the Knull into Great Portal. I think about the death into Warrior Falls, but ultimately, I don't think my opponent is going to play there. If they do play there, they're going to play there with Knull, where my death would not be able to beat it. So I think that throwing death into Warrior Falls is just a waste of death. So ultimately, I'm going to decide to play both Death and Nico for 14 points up to 28 into Hotel Inferno, and that plays around some things as well. Unfortunately, this does not play around Rogue stealing my Knull in the Great Portal. An incredible read from my opponent there. However, it does play around Deadpool plus Mobius into Hotel Inferno, so I still grab the win and take my opponent for 8 cubes. So with that, that put me for the very first time onto the global post-infinite leaderboard. We'll let this animation play out, and I've kept playing. I'm actually going to take a look at a few more games here just because I got a whole bunch more sweet highlights to showcase. But there I am in all of my glory at 907 with over 8,000 snap points, so pretty sweet. But like I said, I did want to take a look at some other cool games that I've played since then. I'm currently in about the top 700, top 650, somewhere in there, and the top 200 in America. I'm still playing at least until Infinite Conquest comes out, then maybe I'll do a few of those. And I think I just have a bunch of sweet highlights that I want to showcase from before getting to the top 1,000 and after. So at some point, there's going to be some like best of destroy video on my channel. Here I'm going for the Deadpool on turn 2. I held on to the Deadpool on turn 1 for just a moment, thinking that maybe we could get a better on reveal out of Nico, but now I'm going to structure it Deadpool and then Nico, and then next turn I will play Hulkbuster onto Deadpool, and that will give me an additional 6 power Deadpool in my hand. So that Hulkbuster will attach on here, and then we'll get an additional copy of it, and then my Deadpool will die in Murder World. I just wanted to take a look at some sweet high roll games here to cap off the video to end on some really exciting notes. My opponent plays Mystique into Altar of Death, so they are going to have a bunch of energy this turn, and they also have priority, which means they could potentially disrupt me in Altar of Death, but I'm just kind of hoping that they won't, and if they don't, we have like an incredible play here. My opponent does have Onslaught though, which is like one potential way to battle against these huge, insane numbers that I'm going to be able to pull out of Deadpool. However, my opponent doesn't have access to Mystique. They can't play Mystique into Nowhere anyways, but they also lost their Mystique. So that is making me feel a little bit more confident as well. And now I've got 11 energy and a bunch of different potential play options. There's a few things that I think about on this turn. Basically, I'm pretty sure I want to eat my Deadpools with Venom. That's just a bunch of free power. And then I can play like the Deadpools into Nowhere next turn and potentially battle with my opponent with those. So those are the ideas that I'm currently cooking with. I do think about using Carnage to kill the Wolverine, but then I realize that I probably want that Wolverine in Altar of Death because that's a location 1, and then that means I only have to win one of these other 2 locations, which I think affords me a lot here. However, what I am going to do is play Killmonger into Altar of Death. That way I get 2 additional energy next turn, and that way in case I draw Knull, I'll be able to play both the Deadpools and the Knull next turn. And my opponent plays Claw. An onslaughted up Claw into Altar of Death now means that I've probably lost in that location. So this game is a little bit tricky here still, but I do think that I still just have a bunch of power, and I might yet still be able to defeat my opponent in Nowhere. So that's the plan. I'm going to need to put a bunch of power into Nowhere though, and the fact that my opponent is snapping also makes me like a little bit fearful of a Shang-Chi. So I'm gonna play around Shang-Chi here as well. There are a few ways to do that actually. I could have used Carnage to destroy my Venom, but then I could like lose to something else random. So I'm not gonna do that. I am just going to throw one of my Deadpools into Nowhere and one of my Deadpools into Murder World because my opponent has priority. So if they Shang-Chi me, then I will flip up a Deadpool after that fact. Just reordering the cards slightly, don't think that it really matters here, but this is ultimately what I'm going to go for. And my opponent has Iron Man. Iron Man into Onslaught is a bunch of power. Then Captain America, that's not going to do anything for them. Don't really know why they did that other than just for fun. But I don't know if you've done the math yet. We just barely beat my opponent in Nowhere, so that's why I thought this was such a fun game. 56-57, an incredibly close one, and I believe that puts me up into the top 800 or so with this win. Let's see where that ranking checks me in at. Just barely. This game will put me into the top 800s then. We're going to take a look at one more game in this video. But if you want to see more, I've got plenty of more sweet Deadpool Destroy highlight clips. Like I said, I think I'm going to do like at least one more big highlight video, and then I'm also going to have a video that's like a little bit more instructional even. I know I'm breaking down some of my plays in this video, but I'm just going to, I think, do a run through a gold conquest and explain like every single one of my plays. It's not going to be super flashy plays, it's just going to be good solid Marvel Snap, which I think that Deadpool Destroy can consistently do, which is why I think it is a great deck. We got White Samurai out of the hub on this one, and we've got a little bit of extra energy thanks to the Super Flow. I've set up Wolverine in the center, and my opponent has got a Nebula. On turn 3, I'm just passing, and I'm hoping that Nico can give me something better to do with Deadpool. Kind of a bold decision to make here. But I figured with the extra energy from Superflow that like I could maybe afford to do this. Ultimately, I'm going to not really be super happy with the decision here, as my opponent plays Storm, flooding that third location, and then an Iron Lad is going to definitely lock that location up. I think there was some chance that I could have taken that location previously with like Wolverine flipping in there, plus a Killmonger for Nebula, but now with the Iron Lad, it is looking really, really rough for me. Nico is now on the copy card mode, which is potentially worth trying to take advantage of, but now the energy is a little bit tighter thanks to Wolverine flipping into the super flow. I can't do something like Deadpool, Nico, Venom to grab an extra big Venom. So all I can do is play Nico Venom over into Superflow and just hope that that is enough to get me somewhere. And it's reasonable. It gives me a additional 9 power Venom. So it's definitely a start to something here. And then Wolverine is going to flip back into the Superflow, and my opponent is going to play Vision into the hub. On turn 5, again, just 5 energy here, but we do find that Killmonger eventually. So maybe we can still make something interesting happen. Gonna go for Venom this turn to destroy 3 cards, and that's super important, and potentially get that Wolverine back into the flooded location. Actually could be reasonable for me yet again. My opponent plays Medusa into the hub, so that is a bunch of points, but Wolverine into the flooded location will actually tie the location, which I think is a super spicy thing that my opponent is probably unaware of on this final turn of the game. And now my opponent could Shang-Chi me in Superflow. But like, we're kind of okay if that happens, and I could have even played the Deadpool into Superflow so that way we would beat a Shang-Chi, but I decided to at least try to battle for the hub. We're going to be tying in the flooded location though, so this is really just a points game, and the rest of it really doesn't matter. It's just going to come down to differential. One card I wasn't considering here was Alioth, but it really doesn't matter because Killmonger destroying the Nebula still makes this a game of differential, and with my 30 power Venom, we are able to get it done. Only for 2 cubes there, but still that will put me up into the top 800, and for this video, that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.